I still remember the weight of that afternoon, the kind of quiet, golden light that makes you feel like life is trying to tell you a secret. I had just finished a long morning of small repair calls when her address came through. Nothing unusual. A sink issue. A simple job. I wiped my hands on my work apron, loaded my tools into the truck, and drove the few blocks into one of those older neighborhoods where every house had a personality of its own. I didn't know yet that behind one of those doors was a woman who would change the entire rhythm of my days. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately as if she had been standing there waiting. Evelyn, 45, soft eyes, warm smile. The kind of elegance that didn't need effort. It simply existed in the way she held herself, the way she exhaled, the way her presence settled into a room before she even stepped into it. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. I just stood on our doorstep, feeling strangely aware of the beating in my chest. "Come in," she said gently, stepping aside. Her voice had a warmth to it that wrapped around me like a shawl. I walked in, smelling fresh lavender and something faintly citrus from a candle burning in the hall. My hands were still cold from outside, but the house felt lived in, safe, comforting. She extended her hand, not to shake, but to lightly touch my arm as she guided me past the entryway. Her fingers were soft, warm, and her touch lingered for a second longer than expected. It wasn't intentional, not clearly. But it wasn't accidental either. And I felt it. A spark, a pull, something subtle but undeniable waking up inside me. "The kitchen's this way," she said, smiling over her shoulder as I followed her. Her hair brushed the back of her sweater as she turned, catching the light in a soft wave. She walked slowly enough that I stayed close behind her, close enough to feel the calmness she carried. I didn't know her, not really, but there was something about her presence that made my footsteps lighter. My nerves unexpectedly alive. We exchanged the usual small talk, nothing too personal. Just polite conversation, but underneath it, something else hummed quietly. A gentle awareness. A mutual recognition neither of us dared name yet. When we reached the kitchen, she placed her hand on my arm again, guiding me forward with a tenderness that seemed almost instinctive. I set my toolbox down, trying to steady myself. I was a professional, after all, but it had been a long time since any touch, had stirred anything more than routine. And yet here I was, standing in the soft light of a stranger's kitchen, feeling warmth in places I had forgotten could warm Dot as I knelt to inspect the sink. I caught her watching me, not in a curious way, but in a way that made me feel seen. Not just as a handywoman, not just as a visitor, but as someone she was quietly trying to understand, and something in me, something I didn't expect, wanted to be understood, wanted to stay, wanted more, but that realization would come later, much later. For now, all I knew was this: the day I knocked on her door, something opened in me too. The sink was stubborn from the start, one of those fixtures that didn't just leak water, but attitude. I crouched down, opened the cabinet doors, and slid myself beneath, feeling the wood press against my shoulders. It was a familiar position, one I'd been in hundreds of times before. But this time, the air around me felt charged, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Soft, deliberate, like she was trying not to intrude even though she already had. Evelyn knelt beside me, far closer than any homeowner ever chose to sit. When I glanced to the side, her knee was just inches from my hip, close enough that when I shifted to grab a wrench, her knee brushed against me. Dot, she didn't apologize. And I didn't move away. "I hope you don't mind," she said gently, folding her hands in her lap. "I just like to learn what's going on in my own house." I smiled under the cabinet. She couldn't see it, but I felt it soften something in my chest. "That's completely fine," I said, adjusting a pipe. "Just watch your head. This space likes to fight back." She laughed softly, and the sound drifted down to me like warm air. It wasn't loud, but it settled right into the small space between us. Her knee touched my hip again, but this time it stayed there. Not intentionally pressing, but resting, comfortable, present. So she began, as if she had practiced the question before speaking it. How long have you been doing this kind of work? I told her about my 12 years as a handywoman, about learning from my father, about enjoying the quiet satisfaction of fixing things other people gave up on. She listened as though none of it was mundane, as though each word was a secret she had been waiting to hear. And do you live alone? She asked, her voice dipping into a softer register. That question, simple, but it opened a door in me I hadn't touched in a long time. Yeah, I said, tightening a bolt. Been on my own for a while. Me too. Her reply was quiet, almost tender. Sometimes the silence in this house feels heavier than it should. I didn't need to see her face to feel the vulnerability in the room. It settled over both of us, along with the mild scent of lavender still hanging in the kitchen air dot as I slid out from under the cabinet to test the water pressure. A small line of dust streaked across my cheek. Evelyn noticed instantly. She leaned in slowly, deliberately, and brushed it away with her thumb. Her touch was featherlight, warm, lingering just one heartbeat. Too long. It wasn't a casual gesture. It wasn't something homeowners normally did. It was something else, something that made my breath catch and my pulse stumble. Our eyes met, close enough that I could see the faint gold around her irises. She didn't move her hand right away. She just watched me like the streak of dust had been an excuse rather than a reason. The sink still wasn't behaving. But neither, it seemed. Where are we? I stood up too fast, too close. My shoulder grazed the counter, and in that same instant, my chest pressed into hers. We both froze completely still, faces inches apart, breath shared in the narrow kitchen space. The air between us changed, like a warm shift in pressure before a storm. My heart thudded against my ribs, not from the motion, but from her nearnes. Evelyn didn't step back. She didn't laugh or turn away or brush it off. Instead, she placed her hands gently on my waist to steady me. Just lightly at first, but then her fingers lingered, not holding me in place, not pushing me away, just resting there, as if her hands had found a place they weren't ready to leave. Her touch was calm, confident, familiar in a way that made no sense, and yet felt completely right. We looked at each other, and it was different now. Her eyes weren't curious anymore. They were tender, deep, like they saw past the conversation, past the tools and work and polite banter. She wasn't just looking at me. She was seeing me. I swallowed hard, unsure what I was supposed to do with my hands, with my breath. With the sudden wave of warmth that spread through me like heat from a low fire. Sorry, I whispered, barely audible, but Evelyn shook her head, the corners of her mouth lifting in the smallest, softest smile. Don't be. Her voice had changed to lower, steadier, almost like she was saying something much larger than those two words. Her thumbs gently traced the edges of my waist through the fabric of my shirt, just enough to make me feel like I was the only person in the room who mattered. Maybe the only person who had mattered in a while. It wasn't inappropriate. Not rushed. Not planned. But it was innocent, undeniably so. I felt something move through me, something I hadn't allowed in a long time. Not just attraction, not just longing, but awareness. The kind that creeps in through the small spaces, through warmth, silence, and gentle hands. Evelyn eventually stepped back, but slowly, like she wanted to leave a piece of her warmth behind. Her fingers slid from my waist with careful reluctance, not dropped suddenly like an accident, but released deliberately with memory. She gave me a soft smile. One of those smiles that's not meant for just anyone. The kind that feels like a secret you're being trusted with. I smiled back. I didn't mean to. It just happened quiet, shy, but full of something that felt a little like gratitude and a little like surrender, whatever this was. It wasn't just loneliness. She wasn't just someone who needed help with a sink, and I wasn't just someone passing through. I didn't have the words for it yet. Neither did she. But in that still moment, I think we both knew that first touch. It was already lasting too long to be forgotten. I owe you at least a cup of coffee, Evelyn said, already halfway to the kettle before I could protest. I started to reply some mix of, you really don't have to, and I should get going. But the words never quite made it out. Something about the way she moved in her kitchen, like she belonged to every corner of it, made it impossible to leave just yet. And maybe I didn't want to. She poured the water into two mismatched mugs, one floral, one plain white, and slid them onto the small round table by the window. The space was cozy, sunlit, a little too intimate for two people who barely knew each other. But I didn't mind. I sat down, and so did she, a little closer than I expected. Her knee brushed against mine beneath the table, and neither of us moved away. I told myself it was just coffee. That's all. A warm drink and a few more minutes of polite conversation before I headed to my next job. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like something else entirely. She cradled her mug, eyes watching me over the rim as I stirred mine. You have strong hands, she said, her tone light but sincere. You make it look easy, what you do. Crawling under cabinets, fixing things most people would give up on. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, not from embarrassment exactly, but from the way she said it. Like strength was something she saw not just in my arms, but in me. Well, I said, looking down into the swirling coffee, strong hands come in handy. She laughed, genuine, soft, and a little dangerous in how good it felt to hear it. When I looked up again, she was watching me closely, her gaze drifting just briefly to my lips before meeting my eyes again. The air in the kitchen shifted, slowed. She reached toward the small bowl of sugar at the center of the table, just as I did. Our fingers touched lightly, then fully. Neither of us pulled back. Her skin was warm, her nails short, clean. The touch was nothing dramatic, just fingers resting on fingers. But the stillness that followed made it feel like a secret exchanged without words. I finally spoke, my voice lower than before. You always sit this close to your repair woman? She tilted her head. Only the ones who fix more than just pipes. That made me smile and maybe blush a little. I didn't expect someone like her to flirt. Not with someone like me. But she was. Not loudly. Not obviously. Just enough. I stirred the sugar into my cup, and we both sipped quietly for a few seconds. The silence between us soft and warm, not awkward, not rushed. I couldn't tell you exactly what was happening. Only that it felt like the kind of moment you don't get many chances at. The kind of moment that shouldn't feel like a date, but did. Just as I finished the last sip of coffee, a low rumble echoed outside. At first it sounded distant, harmless, just weather shifting. But within seconds, the sky opened and rain came down in fierce. Heavy sheets that slapped the windows and blurred the world beyond them. The suddenness of it made me jump slightly, and Evelyn looked toward the storm with the kind of resigned smile that said she knew exactly what this meant. You're not driving in that, she said softly, almost hopefully. Please just wait a little. These storms pass quickly. I glanced at the window again, where water streamed in endless rivers. She was right. I couldn't leave. And maybe deep down, I didn't want to. All right, I said. I'll wait. Her face brightened in a way that made something warm settle into my chest. She led me from the kitchen to the living room, a room filled with soft, amber lighting from a small lamp in the corner and a few candles flickering on a shelf. It felt like stepping into a familiar evening, even though I'd never been there before. Sit, she said. Patting the couch gently, I lowered myself into the cushions, surprised at how natural it felt to be there in her space. While the storm rattled the world outside, Evelyn joined me, close enough that her thigh brushed mine again, close enough that I could smell the faint lavender still clinging to her sweater. She grabbed a knitted blanket draped over the arm of the couch, and without hesitation, she wrapped it around both of us, her hand sliding behind my back, then resting lightly on my arm as she arranged the fabric. The blanket was warm, soft, and pulled us together in a way that made the rest of the room feel far away. "You must be cold," she murmured, her voice dipping low. I wasn't, not even a little. But I didn't correct her. "Thank you," I said instead, matching her softness. We sat there listening to the rain hammer the windows, the rhythm steady and almost soothing. The world had shrunk to that couch, that blanket, that closeness. My heartbeat slowed, then quickened again when she shifted beside me. She tucked one leg under herself, leaning slightly toward me, and then quietly, she rested her head on my shoulder. At first, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The touch was gentle, but it sank right into me. She didn't rush it, didn't pull away as if testing a boundary. She simply stayed there, her temple warm against me, her hair brushing softly against my neck. I let my shoulder ease into hers, accepting the weight, accepting the moment. My hand, without thinking, rested lightly on the blanket near her arm. Not touching her directly, just close enough to feel the shared warmth. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the world felt dim, quiet, intimate. It didn't feel like being trapped. Like being kept. The storm was still going strong when Evelyn stood, adjusting the blanket over my lap before walking slowly toward the hallway. She paused near the base of the staircase, her hand trailing lightly along the banister as she looked over her shoulder at me. Her voice came soft, almost playful, but beneath it, there was something else. Something that made me sit up straighter, actually. She said with the faintest smile, "There's a bigger leak upstairs." She let the words hang there, just long enough for me to catch the meaning behind them. It was an invitation. Not into something improper or rushed, but into something intentional. I stood, heart ticking faster, not from nerves exactly, but from a different kind of awareness. The kind that comes when something long unspoken finally steps into the room. I followed her slowly up the staircase, each step creaking softly beneath us. The rain hit the roof above, a steady percussion that made the silence between us feel deeper, intimate, almost fragile. As we reached the landing, Evelyn stayed behind me, close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence before her hand gently grazed the small of my back. It wasn't firm, just a brush of her fingertips, an anchor, a reassurance. Like she didn't want to guide me as much as she wanted to keep me close. The upstairs hallway was dim, lit only by a small lamp on a side table. She led me into the guest room where the supposed leak was. The air in the room was warmer than I expected, soft, with the scent of cedar and clean linen. A single lamp cast a pool of golden light near the window. The ceiling did have a faint mark, a real leak. Yes, but I barely noticed it. Evelyn stood beside me, arms folded loosely, watching me more than the stain on the ceiling. "I've been meaning to call someone about it," she said, almost apologetically. "You just did," I replied gently. She smiled at that small, but real. But we both knew this wasn't about plumbing. She stepped closer, not dramatically, just enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Her presence felt different now. Still calm, still warm, but no longer veiled. She wasn't just asking for company. She was offering connection. I looked around the room, neat, simple, quiet. It didn't feel like a place someone brought strangers into. It felt personal. like a space she kept to herself until now. There was no urgency, no pressure, just a soft energy between us that said, you can stay if you want. Not because of the rain, not because of the leak, but because something here matters. And in that warm upstairs room with her standing quietly beside me, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe in a long time. She didn't just want me to fix the leak dot, she wanted me to see it. She wanted me to stay. I crouched beneath the small upstairs sink, flashlight in one hand, the other feeling along the pipe for dampness. The leak was real minor, manageable, but my mind wasn't fully on the work anymore. Not with Evelyn standing just behind me, silent but near, her presence filling the quiet room like sunlight warming a corner that hadn't seen it in a while. A moment later, she knelt beside me, her knees gently pressing against the floorboards. I could feel the warmth of her shoulder near mine, the soft sound of her breath. Is it bad? She asked quietly, almost as if she were asking something else entirely. Not too bad, I said, glancing at her. Just needs tightening. A little attention. We both paused at the double meaning in my words. She smiled softly, eyes flicking to the pipe, then back to me. As I reached forward again, our hands brushed bare skin against bare skin. A pause. A flicker of heat, then her fingers didn't pull away. Instead, they found mine, slowly, deliberately. At first, it was just fingertips exploring, hesitant. But then our palms met, and her hand folded gently around mine. No words, no explanation. Just that quiet agreement between two people who had been alone too long and suddenly weren't. She exhaled, shaky and honest. It's been a long time since I felt this close to someone. Her voice trembled slightly at the edges, not from fear, but from the courage it took to say it out loud. I turned toward her and let my thumb trace the side of her hand. Me too, I whispered, longer than I care to admit. Her eyes welled a little, not with sadness, but something softer, something like relief. She leaned against the cabinet beside me, still holding my hand like it anchored her. We weren't strangers anymore, not really. That touch said more than introductions ever could. The two of us sat there on the floor, backs resting against the wall, our legs bent, hands entwined like it was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, the storm had started to quiet. Inside, the silence was peaceful, thick with emotion, but not uncomfortable. I looked down at our joined hands and felt the world narrow to that one point of connection. It wasn't about passion or rushing into something. It was about being seen, being held without needing to ask. Evelyn laid her head softly against my shoulder, and I let mine rest gently against hers. We didn't move, didn't speak, just breath together, steady and slow. The pipe could wait. Right now, something far more delicate had been fixed. Something that neither of us had touched in years, but somehow, in this small upstairs room, in the warmth of each other's hands, we have found again. The rain had faded to a whisper against the roof, no longer a storm, just a hush. Like the world was being careful not to interrupt what was unfolding upstairs. Evelyn and I still sat on the floor, backs against the wall, hands softly intertwined. The room was quiet except for the sound of our breathing, in sync now, steady and calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come often. The kind you feel deep in your chest when you finally stop waiting to be alone and start realizing you're not. I turned my head slightly, enough to see her profile. Her lips were parted just a little, her expression unreadable and open all at once. She looked at me too, and neither of us looked away. She released my hand then, not to pull away, but to reach for my face. Her fingers moved slowly, brushing along my jaw, then cupping my cheek with the softest kind of care. The warmth of her palm settled there like it had always belonged. We didn't speak. There was no need. Everything in that room had already been said through the silence, the touches, the closeness that grew without force. Her thumb traced just under my eye, then rested still. Then she leaned in, not fast, not tentative either. Just slow. Certain daughter foreheads met gently, and we paused there, eyes closed, sharing the same breath. There was a stillness in that moment that I'll never forget along. Unspoken agreement. We were both choosing this. When our lips finally met, it wasn't a kiss made of fire. It was something deeper, slower, a kind of warmth that filled the space between aching and healing. Her lips pressed softly to mine, holding there, not asking for more, not demanding anything. Just being there. It was a kiss that didn't need to prove anything. It simply said, I see you. I feel you. I'm here. When we parted, neither of us moved far. Her forehead rested lightly against mine again, her hand still holding my cheek. My eyes stayed closed for a moment longer, memorizing the feeling. The quiet grace of it. We leaned back against the wall once more, this time closer, shoulder to shoulder. No space between us now. Her hand slipped back into mine. I didn't think I'd feel this way again. She whispered, me either. I murmured. And we didn't say more than that. We didn't have to. There was peace in the quiet, a soft kind of happiness in the way our bodies leaned naturally together, in the way the air around us had shifted from polite and cautious to shared and certain. No grand declarations. No dramatic music, just two women sitting on a floor, wrapped in the safety of each other's presence, and a first kiss that felt less like a beginning and more like a home. After the kiss, nothing needed explaining. We didn't rush into more. We simply rose from the floor, side by side, and let the rest of the day unfold as naturally as breath. The storm had passed, but neither of us mentioned it. There was no talk of leaving, no awkward shifting back into roles. Instead, Evelyn moved through her home with a new ease. Like something in her had softened, opened, and I followed. Feeling more like a welcome guest than a visitor passing through, we found ourselves in the kitchen again, this time not separated by tools or tasks. She poured us both fresh water, and I helped dry a few dishes she had left out. Simple things. The kind you do with someone who feels like part of your day, not just part of your afternoon. She laughed when I fumbled a glass with wet fingers. I laughed too. It was the kind of laughter that didn't just break the tension, it warmed the space between us, filled it with something lighter, freer. As I dried my hands at the sink, she stepped behind me with a towel and took over. Her hands covered mine gently, wrapping the towel around them, drying slowly, carefully, more caress than chore. Her fingers lingered between mine just a little too long. Neither of us pretended not to notice. When I turned to face her, I found her standing close again, that same soft energy humming between us. I reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, half out of instinct, half because I wanted an excuse to touch her again. Her eyes closed at the contact just for a moment, and when she opened them again, they held something quiet and certain. Would you stay for dinner? She asked, her voice gentle but unmistakably weighted with more than politeness. I paused, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel the full weight of the moment. It wasn't just an invitation to share a meal. It was an invitation to stay a little longer in the space we'd just begun to create. I'd love to, I said softly. Her smile was brighter this time, less reserved, more open. She turned toward the pantry, already talking about what she could put together. But I stayed where I was for a moment longer, watching her move through the room, barefoot, casual, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or effort, and everything to do with comfort and honesty. The sun had started to dip behind the trees outside. Golden light spilled in through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Everything felt slower, fuller, real. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't strangers. That evening, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically taut, but completely. Dinner was quiet in the best way, slow, unrushed, like time had taken a deep breath and stretched out just for us. Evelyn moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, stirring, seasoning, plating everything with simple grace. I helped where I could, but mostly I watched her, how calm she looked, how different she seemed now that something between us had shifted. We ate by candlelight at the small table near the window, 2 bowls of warm pasta between us, glasses of wine resting close to our fingertips. The storm had passed, but the outside world felt far away, distant, and irrelevant compared to what was unfolding here between us. We talked about easy things at first, music, recipes, books we never quite finished. But eventually the air around us thickened, as if something deeper had been waiting its turn. Evelyn set down her fork and folded her hands quietly in her lap. I haven't had someone sit across from me like this in a long time, she said softly, not since before the divorce. I looked at her, waiting, not pressing, just open. She continued, her voice steady but low. I thought I'd be okay on my own. I told myself I liked the quiet, but the truth is, I've been scared. Scared that I gave away the best parts of myself to someone who never really saw me, and that there wouldn't be anything left for someone else. Her words hung between us like the softest weight. I reached across the table, slowly, and placed my hand over hers. I know what that feels like, I said, the words more honest than I expected. My last relationship ended years ago. Nothing messy, just silence where love used to be. After a while, I stopped trying to fill the quiet. I just let it stay. Evelyn turned her palm over and curled her fingers around mine. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something more tender, more grateful. We didn't speak for a moment. We didn't need to. The silence now wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of permission, of something soft growing between two people who thought they'd already missed their chance. Then, slowly, Evelyn lifted my hand to her lips and kissed my knuckles just once. Not with hunger, not with urgency, with reverence. The kind of kiss that says thank you for showing up when I thought no one would. I looked at her, and in that moment, I didn't feel like a guest anymore. I felt like something more. Someone seen. No walls, no rush, just presence. The candles flickered gently as our hands stayed joined on the table. We didn't move any closer that night, not physically, but emotionally, we had already crossed the room. After dinner, the house felt even quieter, like it had settled with us, cradling the calm we'd built between candlelight and conversation. I stood near the sink, rinsing our wine glasses, when Evelyn came up behind me, her presence gentle but certain. Will you stay a little longer? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to face her. Her eyes were soft, hopeful. She didn't need to explain what she meant. I nodded. A little longer, I said. She smiled, and that smile, so full of quiet joy, was enough to make me forget the rest of the world. She led me back to the living room where the lamp still glowed, and the couch waited like it knew we'd return. We curled into the cushions together, shoulder to shoulder, the same knit blanket pulled over us once more. Only this time, our closeness wasn't accidental. It was chosen. Her leg rested against mine. My hand found her knee. She looked over at me, her eyes shining with something she'd stopped hiding. She leaned in, first pressing a soft kiss to my cheek, then another slower to my forehead. I closed my eyes and let the warmth sink in. There was nothing rushed in her touch. No urgency. Just quiet affection, like she was rediscovering what it meant to give tenderness without fear. When her lips met mine again, it was even gentler than before. A soft brushing of warmth and trust, not asking for more than what the moment held. We kissed like people who'd waited long enough. like we didn't need more than what we already had in each other's arms. I wrapped my arm around her, and she melted into me, resting her head on my chest as if it were a place she already knew. I could feel her breathing slow, her body relax, the last of her guardedness letting go as we settled deeper into the couch. "I don't know what this is yet," she whispered, her voice muffled slightly by my shirt, "but it feels like something I want to protect." I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "It feels like something I want to build." She tilted her face up to me, eyes glistening not with tears, but with a kind of peace. We talked quietly for a while about nothing, about everything, about what it meant to start again at our age, about how love wasn't about fireworks anymore, but warmth, safety, presence, a reason to wake up feeling whole. Eventually, her eyes began to close, her breath softening into sleep. I leaned back, holding her, watching the shadows dance on the wall from the candlelight we'd forgotten to blow out. There, in the quiet of her home, her head on my chest. Our fingers still intertwined, I realized something. Love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came wrapped in blankets and felt exactly like coming home. Funny how life changes when you're just trying to do your job. I went to her house to fix a sink. That's all it was supposed to be: tighten a few pipes, stop a leak, say goodbye, move on. It wasn't supposed to lead anywhere. Certainly not to here, but somewhere between the kitchen floor and the upstairs hallway. Something shifted. Love didn't show up with flowers or big gestures. It arrived in the warmth of her hand resting on mine, in the way she dried my fingers with a towel like she'd been waiting to do it for years. In the silence between us that never once felt empty. It arrived slowly, kindly, unexpectedly. And maybe that's how real love works, not crashing in, but unfolding softly, so gently that you barely realize you're falling into it until you already have. I didn't expect to be touched. Not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't expect her to see me, really see me, the way no one had in so long. I didn't expect that fixing her sink would lead to fixing something I hadn't even realized was broken inside myself. We were two women with quiet lives and long histories of silence. Two hearts that had grown, used to their own rhythms, never expecting to be interrupted. But then she touched my hand, and she didn't let go. So I ask you now, if someone touched your hand the way she touched mine, gently, intentionally, like they weren't just reaching for your skin, but for your soul, would you have pulled away? Or would you have held on? Because that moment, that first slow, certain intertwining of fingers, it changed everything. It wasn't about the romance. It wasn't about desire. It was about being seen. It was about being safe. It was about finding something you didn't know you were still searching for. And when she looked at me and said, "Actually, there's a bigger leak upstairs," what she really meant was, I don't want to be alone anymore. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. And when I followed her up those stairs, I wasn't just chasing a repair job. I was answering something deeper. So tell me, what would you have done if you were standing in a quiet house, heart humming, thunder rolling in the distance? If someone opened their door, their heart, their past, and maybe even a future with your name in it, would you have walked away? Or would you have stayed? Tell me, what would you have done when she said there's a bigger leak upstairs? Fade out?